He's more of a man than you are. Eleanor's words sliced through me like a razor's edge, but it was watching Sam, my 12-year-old son, run into Richard's open arms that truly shattered me. There I stood, frozen in the middle of my mother-in-law's 75th birthday celebration in the elegant backyard of her Preston Hollow home, while everyone, family, friends, neighbors, witnessed my utter humiliation. I managed a slight smile, picked up my glass of aged bourbon, and downed it in one fiery gulp. The alcohol burned my throat, but that pain was insignificant compared to the ache in my chest. Without a word, I turned and walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop me. My name is James Jim Miller. I'm 62 years old, and I own 3 highly successful luxury car dealerships in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I built my business from the ground up, starting as a salesman at 19, sometimes sleeping on the office floor just to save the bus fare. My father, a farmer from rural Oklahoma, taught me that a man is measured by his work, his word, and his ability to provide for his family. A man who doesn't provide doesn't deserve respect, he would repeat as we worked the fields under the hot summer sun. I swore that my children would never have to work the land. They would attend the best schools and have every opportunity I had missed. I met Eleanor at an international auto show in Detroit. She was a model, posing next to a shimmering red convertible that I dreamed of one day selling at my own agency. She was 23, I was 34. It took 3 months of relentless persistence to get her to agree to a first date. Car salesmen have a reputation for lying, she told me with a laugh on that first night. I'll have to get to know you better to see if you're different. 5 years later, we married. I had already opened my first small dealership in the burgeoning Deep Ellum district. The day Sam was born, I signed the contract for the second one in the Uptown Business District. The first few years were great. Eleanor quit modeling to focus on our son and managed the sprawling home in River Oaks that I had bought for them. I worked 16-hour days, sometimes 7 days a week. When I arrived home, exhausted, Eleanor would greet me with dinner ready and updates on Sam's milestones. His first word, his first steps, his first drawings. On the rare weekends I could clear my schedule, we'd take Sam to the Dallas World Aquarium or drive down to Lake Texoma. We were happy. At least, I thought we were. The distance began subtly, so gradual that I didn't even notice it at first. Calls to let her know I wouldn't make it home for dinner. Sam's birthday parties where I arrived after most of the guests had left. Promises of family vacations that always ended up postponed by a business crisis. Eleanor stopped waiting up for me. Conversations at the table became shorter, more strained. "When was the last time you asked how we were doing, Jim?" she challenged me one night. "I ask every day," I replied, genuinely confused. "You ask like you're checking the weather, just to check a box, but you never truly listen to the answer," she said before getting up and leaving me alone with my half-finished plate. When Sam turned 10, Eleanor asked for a divorce. We were in Maui, on a vacation I had promised for 3 years and finally delivered on. Sam was asleep in the adjoining room of the suite. "I don't love you anymore, Jim," she stated simply, without tears, without drama. "We've been roommates for years, not husband and wife." I tried to argue, negotiate, and promise immediate change. "It's too late," she replied. "I've met someone who makes me feel alive again." The divorce was superficially civil. I gave Eleanor the River Oaks house, a very generous monthly settlement, and a new car every 2 years. I assured Sam he would stay in the same private school, have everything he needed, and that nothing would change, except that Dad would live somewhere else. I bought a penthouse downtown. I hired a housekeeper. I set up a visitation schedule that allowed me to see my son every weekend. On the surface, everything was under control. Richard appeared 6 months after the divorce. Eleanor introduced him as a friend when I went to pick up Sam. Tall, graying hair, an easy smile, and confident eyes. A university literature professor, a writer with 2 published novels. The complete opposite of me, a practical businessman, high school educated, whose library consisted mainly of sales manuals and biographies of successful entrepreneurs. At first, Sam spoke little of Richard during our weekends. When he did, I quickly changed the subject, uncomfortable. But as the months passed, the mentions became more frequent, more enthusiastic. "Richard is teaching me chess. Richard says I have a real talent for writing. Richard took me to a great jazz concert. Every phrase was like a small cut. What did this man know about music that I didn't? Why did my son need another mentor when he had me? I tried to compensate with the only thing I knew how to do well: provide. I bought Sam a state-of-the-art laptop, a professional mountain bike, and designer sneakers his friends envied. I organized trips to Six Flags, football games, and car races. I took him to my dealerships. I explained how the business worked. I proudly showed him how the employees respected me, how clients trusted me. "Someday, all this will be yours, son," I told him one Sunday as we toured my largest dealership in the Galleria area with its gleaming luxury cars. Sam, then 11, looked at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. "What if I don't want to be a car salesman, Dad? What if I want to be a writer, like Richard?" The question hit me like a slap. A writer for what? To starve? Writers don't make real money, Sam. You need something practical, something that gives you stability. His face darkened. "Richard says the most important thing is doing what you're passionate about." Richard says, I mimicked, losing my patience. What does Richard know about the real world? Do you think he could give you everything I give you with his little poetry books? The rest of the day passed in uncomfortable silence. When I dropped him off at Eleanor's that night, Sam barely said goodbye. I stayed in the car, watching him enter the house without looking back. Through the illuminated window, I could see Richard greeting him with a hug that my son enthusiastically returned. Eleanor soon appeared, smiling, and the three disappeared inside. A perfect family picture I wasn't a part of. That night, driving back to my solitary penthouse, I felt for the first time that I was losing my son. No, that I had already lost him. The following week, Sam started making excuses not to spend weekends with me. Schoolwork, special projects, invitations from friends he couldn't turn down. Eleanor mediated, trying to persuade him. "Your father has set aside time for you, Sam. You need to respect that." But I could see in her eyes that she wasn't truly invested in convincing him. When he finally agreed to come, he spent most of the time in his room, reading or texting friends. Our conversations were limited to monosyllables from him and increasingly desperate questions from me. "How's school?" "Fine." "Want to go to the movies?" "Dunno." "Are you hungry?" "A little." It was like trying to open a safe without the combination. One afternoon, desperate to connect, I suggested teaching him to drive in a private lot I owned outside the city. "You're 12, but it's not too early to learn. I started at 10 on your grandpa's farm." For the first time in ages, I saw a flicker of interest in his eyes. We drove out to the lot, a wide open space where I kept some classic vehicles I collected as a hobby. I patiently explained how the clutch, accelerator, and brake worked. I sat him on my lap and let him take the wheel while I controlled the pedals. His laughter when we managed a full lap without stalling was music to my ears. "I did it, Dad. I did it." That day, driving home, Sam talked non-stop. He told me about school, his friends, and a book he was secretly writing. "It's an adventure story, Dad, about a kid who discovers he can talk to cars and they tell him stories of their previous owners." I listened, fascinated, discovering a son I barely knew. "Can I read it when you finish?" I asked with genuine interest. "You really want to?" he replied, surprised. "Richard is the only one who has read it so far. He says I have potential." There was Richard again. The name fell like a stone between us, shattering the moment's magic. "Of course I want to read it," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "After all, if it's about cars, I know more about that than Richard, don't you think?" Sam was silent for a moment. "Richard doesn't know much about cars," he conceded finally, "but he knows a lot about stories." We arrived at Eleanor's house just as it was getting dark. To my surprise, my son gave me a brief hug before getting out of the car. "Thanks for the driving lesson, Dad. That was fun." I watched him walk into the house lightly. This time, I didn't stay watching from the car. I felt optimistic for the first time in a long time. The following weekend, Sam came without protest. We returned to the lot for another driving lesson, this time in an automatic so he could concentrate better. Afterward, we went for dinner at a classic BBQ joint I'd frequented since my youth. I told him stories of my childhood in Oklahoma, how I came to the city with just a duffel bag and a few dollars in my pocket, and how I slept at the bus station the first few nights until I found work washing cars. "Why haven't you ever told me this, Dad?" he asked, genuinely interested. The question left me speechless for a moment. Why, indeed? Perhaps because I had always wanted him to see only my success, not the struggle and sacrifice behind it. Perhaps because I feared he would see me as I had seen my father, a simple man with calloused hands and limited horizons. I don't know, son. I guess I wanted you to see only the good part, not the hard part. But the hard part is the interesting part, Dad. The stuff that makes you who you are. Like in stories, a character without obstacles doesn't have a narrative arc, Richard says. There he was again, Richard and his literary theories. But this time, I didn't let the name irritate me. You and Richard are right about that, I conceded. Maybe that's why I've never been very good at telling stories. I only know how to talk about sales, business, practical things. You could learn, Sam said with a shy smile. I could teach you something for once. That day, as I dropped him off, I felt something starting to heal between us, a fragile bridge stretching across the abyss I had created with years of emotional absence. The opportunity to strengthen that bridge came unexpectedly when Eleanor called me midweek. Richard's mother is sick in New York. We have to fly out urgently, and I can't take Sam because he'd missed too much school. Could he stay with you for a few days? Of course, I answered immediately, trying to conceal my enthusiasm. I can rearrange my meetings to be with him in the afternoons. Thank you, Jim, Eleanor said, and I noticed a hint of relief in her voice. Richard was worried you might not want to help after, well, you know. After what? I asked, genuinely confused. After how Sam has been closer to him lately. Richard feels maybe it bothers you. I swallowed my pride. The only thing that matters to me is my son's well-being. If Richard makes him happy, I'm glad for him. There was a brief silence on the other end. You've changed, Jim, Eleanor finally said in a tone I couldn't quite decipher. I'll pick Sam up from school tomorrow, I replied, avoiding the subject. The 5 days Sam spent in my apartment were an unexpected gift. For the first time since the divorce, I was able to experience everyday fatherhood, preparing breakfast, checking homework, talking about his day over dinner. I discovered that my son had a sharp and intelligent sense of humor, that he loved documentaries about ancient history, and that he wrote poetry in addition to stories. One night, he read me one dedicated to his mother. The tenderness and depth of his words moved me to tears, something I hadn't allowed myself since my own father's death. You're very talented, Sam, I told him sincerely. Maybe you should be a writer after all. His eyes lit up. You really think so, Dad? I do. And I want you to know that no matter what, I'll support you. If you want to study literature instead of business administration, that's fine. If you prefer words to cars, that's okay too. What matters is that you're happy, and that you know your father will be proud of you, no matter which path you choose. He looked at me as if he didn't recognize me, as if a stranger had suddenly appeared in place of the father he knew. Why are you saying this now? You've always wanted me to follow in your footsteps. I sighed deeply. Because I'm realizing, perhaps too late, that I've been losing you by trying to mold you in my image. And I'd rather have a writer son who loves me than a business son who resents me. That night, Sam hugged me before going to sleep, a spontaneous gesture that hadn't happened since he was small. I felt something starting to heal between us, though I knew the road would be long. When Eleanor and Richard returned from New York, I noticed a change in my son's attitude. He no longer seemed so anxious to go back to them, even suggesting he stay one more day with me. I like your apartment, Dad. It's quiet for writing. Eleanor seemed surprised by the comment, but said nothing. Richard, always cordial, thanked me for taking care of Sam. It looks like you guys had a great time, he observed. Very great, I replied, and for the first time, I felt no hostility towards this man who had taken my place in my family's life. Perhaps because I was beginning to understand that it wasn't a replacement, but an addition. Sam didn't have to choose between us if we both contributed something valuable to his life. The following weeks brought a new dynamic. Sam started staying with me some weekdays, in addition to the agreed-upon weekends. I installed a small desk in his room. I bought him books by the authors he mentioned. I listened when he spoke of his stories. In return, he showed genuine interest when I told him about the business. He even voluntarily accompanied me to the dealership a couple of times. It was during one of those visits that the incident occurred that would change everything. We had gone to the Galleria dealership on a Saturday morning. I had important documents to review, and afterward, I planned to take Sam to a photography exhibit he had mentioned wanting to see. I left him in my office, writing in his notebook, while I attended to an important client in the showroom. The client, Arthur Kingston, was a well-known entrepreneur, owner of a chain of boutique hotels. He was interested in buying several luxury vehicles for his business. As we discussed the details, his teenage son, Leo, who was accompanying him, began touching the displayed cars, setting off alarms, smudging the windows with his fingers, behaving with the typical disdain of a rich kid accustomed to being allowed everything. "Leo, behave," Kingston told him without real authority before returning to our conversation. The boy ignored him and continued his destructive tour of the showroom. Sam, who had left my office, drawn by the noise, watched the scene with evident disapproval. When Leo opened a limited edition convertible and sat in the driver's seat, stepping on the leather upholstery with his muddy shoes, my son couldn't hold back. "Hey, you shouldn't do that," he said firmly but politely. "You're getting the car dirty and disturbing everyone." Leo, older and stockier than Sam, looked at him with scorn. "And who are you to tell me what I can do, runt? My dad is the owner's client, and I'm asking you politely to respect this place." Kingston, irritated by the interruption, looked at Sam with disdain. "Kid, go play somewhere else. The adults are talking business." I felt my blood boil at the condescending tone toward my son, but I held back. This client represented a significant sale, and in the business world, sometimes you have to swallow your pride. "Sam, go back to the office, please," I said gently. "I'll be done soon and we'll go to the exhibit." My son looked at me in disbelief. "You're not going to say anything? His son is mistreating the cars and he spoke to you like you were beneath him. We'll talk later, son. Please let me handle this." Sam didn't move. "Richard says you should defend your dignity above any business deal. That respect is priceless." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My own son citing his stepfather's lessons to reproach me for my lack of character. Kingston let out a sneering chuckle. "Looks like your kid needs to learn how the real world works. Not everyone can afford to live by the principles in a self-help book." Something broke inside me. He wasn't just insulting my son, he was questioning my authority in front of him. "I'm going to ask you to speak to my son with respect, Mr. Kingston," I said with a calm I didn't feel. Kingston's expression turned into a sneer of disgust. "Are you giving me orders, Miller? Me? Do you know how much money I'm about to spend here?" "I know perfectly well, but I also know that no amount of money is worth more than the respect I owe my son and myself." The words left my mouth almost without thinking, as if someone else was speaking through me, someone braver, more principled. "Come on, Leo," Kingston said, heading for the exit. "We'll find another dealership where they know how to treat important customers." "As you prefer," I replied, maintaining my composure. "But I assure you that in any prestigious place, they'll ask you for the same thing, mutual respect." When the door closed behind them, I felt a mix of panic and liberation. I'd just lost a multi-million-dollar sale to defend, what exactly? My pride? My son's respect? I looked at Sam, expecting to see disappointment in his eyes over the lost business. Instead, what I saw was pure admiration. "That was incredible, Dad," he said with a smile that lit up his whole face. "You defended your dignity, just like Richard says." I should have been annoyed that he mentioned Richard again, but strangely, I felt gratitude. Perhaps this man was teaching my son values that I had forgotten in my obsession with material success. "Your stepfather is a wise man," I said, surprising myself. "He's not my stepfather," Sam corrected, "just Mom's boyfriend. I only have one dad." His words moved me profoundly. I hugged him tightly, feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us. "Let's go to that photography exhibit," I said when we parted, "and afterward, I'll treat you to ice cream in Deep Ellum." The incident with Kingston had unexpected consequences. The following week, I received a call from his assistant. The businessman wanted to personally apologize and resume negotiations. "Mr. Kingston was impressed by your integrity," the assistant explained. "He says he prefers to do business with someone who values respect over money." When I told Sam, he simply smiled and said, "See? Richard was right." This time, the name didn't bother me at all. My ex-mother-in-law, Mrs. Evelyn Sterling's birthday party arrived 2 weeks later. I had always maintained a good relationship with her, even after the divorce, and I didn't hesitate to accept her invitation. It would be the first time I met the extended family since Eleanor and Richard had formalized their relationship. I arrived with an expensive gift and a slightly quickened heart. Mrs. Sterling's home in Preston Hollow was full of people. Family, friends, neighbors. Eleanor and Richard were in the center of the yard, talking animatedly with other guests. Sam was playing touch football with his cousins on one end of the lawn. Eleanor saw me and came over to greet me. She looked lovely in a summer dress that highlighted her still slender figure at 51. "I'm glad you came, Jim," she said sincerely. "My mother is very fond of you." "The feeling is mutual," I replied. "Where's the birthday girl?" "In the kitchen, supervising the final details. You know how she is. She never fully trusts the caterer." We laughed together, sharing the intimate knowledge that only comes from having been family for years. For a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia for what we had lost, but it quickly faded. We had been over for a long time, long before the formal divorce. Richard approached us holding 2 glasses of white wine. He offered one to Eleanor and greeted me cordially. "Jim, good to see you. Sam told us about his driving lessons. He seems to be having a lot of fun with you." "Thanks," I replied, feeling strangely comfortable. "He's a good kid, very talented." "He is," Richard agreed. "His stories have something special, a rare sensitivity for someone his age." "I've been reading his stories. They're genuinely good," I said with genuine pride. "He has a good eye for recognizing talent." Eleanor looked between us, as if she couldn't believe we were having a civil conversation about her son, our son. Sam then appeared, sweaty and smiling, after the impromptu game. "Dad, you came!" He walked over and gave me a quick but heartfelt hug. "I wouldn't miss your grandmother's birthday for anything," I replied, ruffling his hair like when he was small. The afternoon went surprisingly well. I chatted with old acquaintances. I ate delicious dishes prepared under Mrs. Sterling's strict supervision. I even exchanged a few pleasant words with Richard about contemporary American literature, a topic I knew little about but was increasingly interested in thanks to Sam. The problem started during the toast. Mrs. Sterling, slightly tipsy from the wine, took the floor to thank everyone for their presence. After the general thanks, she addressed Richard specifically. "And I especially want to thank Richard, who has brought so much joy to this family, who has been a true partner to my daughter and an exemplary father to my grandson." I felt as if I had been doused with ice water. An exemplary father. Did I not exist? I looked at Eleanor, seeking some sign of discomfort or disapproval of her mother's words, but she was smiling and nodding, holding Richard's hand. Sam, standing near them, looked uncomfortable. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw a silent apology in his. When the applause for Richard ceased, Mrs. Sterling continued. "And I also thank Jim, of course, for always being so generous with Sam, for never failing with the payments." More than a thank you, it sounded like a condescending observation, as if my only value as a father was financial, as if I were a walking ATM and not the person who had fathered, loved, and raised Sam during his early years. I felt anger rising in my throat, but I restrained myself. I wouldn't ruin Mrs. Sterling's celebration, no matter how much her words had hurt me. I raised my glass and smiled tensely, accepting the backhanded compliment with all the dignity I could muster. The party continued, but I no longer felt welcome. I excused myself, saying I had a later commitment, and headed for the exit. Sam caught up to me on the way. "Don't go, Dad. Grandma didn't mean that. You know how she gets when she drinks wine. It's fine, son. I'm not upset. I just have another commitment." The lie sounded hollow, even to me. "I'll walk you to the car," he insisted. As we walked, Sam told me about a short story contest he planned to enter. "Richard says I have a chance to win, but I'm not so sure." "You should trust yourself more," I replied automatically. "You have plenty of talent." "You think so? Do you really like my writing?" "I love it, and I don't just say that because I'm your father." Sam smiled, but the smile quickly vanished. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything, son." "Why were you never like this before? I mean, interested in my stuff and what I like. Before you only talked about the dealership, about it being mine someday, but you never asked what I wanted." The question hit me like a gut punch, mainly because it was true. I'd spent years imposing my dreams on my son without ever considering his own. "I don't have a good answer, Sam," I finally said. "I suppose I was so obsessed with giving you material security that I forgot to ask you what made you happy. My father always said that a man who doesn't provide for his family isn't a real man. I wanted to be that man for you and your mother. But being a man isn't just about giving money, is it?" Richard says, I interrupted him, not out of annoyance this time, but because I needed to express something important. "Richard is right about many things, son. Being a man, being a person, is much more than the money you earn or the things you buy. It's about being present, listening, supporting the dreams of those you love, even if they're different from your own. Those are lessons I'm learning late." Sam looked at me with a mixture of surprise and something akin to respect. Not the forced respect of son for father, but something more genuine, hard-earned. "I'll see you next weekend, right?" he asked. "Of course, and bring your contest story. I'd like to read it if you want." "I will," he said, and gave me a brief hug before returning to the party. I drove off into the Texas sunset, feeling strangely light, despite the incident with Mrs. Sterling. The road to reconciliation with my son was long, but at least I had begun to walk it. I was about to get into my car when I heard heated voices coming from the side of the house. Through the open window of what looked like a study, I could clearly distinguish Eleanor and Richard arguing. "I can't believe my mother said that," Eleanor exclaimed. "She practically denied Jim was Sam's father, in front of everyone. Did you see his face?" "Your mother drank too much," Richard replied in a conciliatory tone. "I don't think she meant to hurt Jim intentionally. But she did. And the worst part is, I didn't say anything. I just stood there silently, as if I agreed." I shouldn't have been listening to this private conversation, but my feet seemed nailed to the ground. Eleanor's confession left me stunned. I'd never suspected that her family despised me for my background, for my lack of a college education. "You're not a hypocrite, Elle." Richard's voice sounded genuinely empathetic. "You're human, and Jim is too. We all make mistakes. He's changed a lot lately," Eleanor continued. "Sam won't stop talking about how much fun they're having together, how his father is finally interested in his stories, in his ideas. It seems like he's making a real effort." "He is," Richard confirmed, "and it's admirable. Not many men would be able to reinvent themselves like that at his age, to question their own convictions." Richard's words, far from offending me, moved me deeply. This man, whom I had resented so much, seemed to have a more generous view of me than I had of myself in a long time. Just then, Sam appeared in the study. I couldn't see his face, but his voice sounded tense. "Grandma is asking where you are. She says it's time to cut the cake." "We're coming, honey," Eleanor replied. "Are you okay? You look worried." "It's Dad. He left looking sad after what Grandma said." "Do you think he's really hurt?" There was a brief silence. Then, Richard's voice. "Your father's a strong man, Sam. He's overcome much worse things in his life. He'll be fine." "But he shouldn't have to overcome these things," my son insisted. "It's not fair. He's changed so much. You both said so. He's not the absent dad anymore. Now he listens to me. He supports me. He's even reading the books I recommend." "You're right," Eleanor admitted. "It's not fair. I'll talk to your grandmother tomorrow when she's sober." "And I'm going to see your father this week," Richard added to my surprise. "I think it's time for us to have a man-to-man conversation without intermediaries." I felt I was violating their privacy, listening in, so I silently walked away toward my car. During the drive home, Richard's words echoed in my mind. A man-to-man conversation. What would he want to say to me? And why did I feel more curiosity than apprehension at the prospect? Richard's call came 3 days later. He invited me out for coffee to talk about Sam. We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop in the trendy Montrose district, away from our respective territories. I found him already seated, a book open in front of him. He was dressed casually but elegantly, linen pants, a light blue shirt, and reading glasses he removed when he saw me arrive. "Jim, thanks for coming," he greeted me, extending his hand. "Thanks for the invitation," I replied, shaking it firmly. After ordering coffee, Richard got straight to the point. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened at Mrs. Sterling's party, which she said was inappropriate and unfair." "It's not necessary," I replied, uncomfortable. "In-laws are always complicated." "They are," he agreed with a slight smile. But that doesn't excuse disrespect. You are Sam's father. I'm just, well, someone who's in his life now, but I would never pretend to replace you." His sincerity disarmed me. This man who had everything I had lost, education, culture, Eleanor's love, Sam's admiration, seemed genuinely concerned about my feelings. "Sam talks about you a lot," he continued. "He says you've changed, that you truly listen now, that you're interested in his things." "I'm trying," I admitted. I realized too late that I was losing my son by trying to mold him in my image. Richard nodded understandingly. "It's a common trap in fatherhood. We project our dreams, our fears, our ambitions onto them. We forget that they are distinct people with their own paths." "You seem to have understood that from the beginning," I observed without bitterness. "I have the advantage of not being his biological father," he replied with a humility I hadn't expected. "It's easier to be objective when you don't see your own reflection in the child's eyes. Besides, I came into his life when he was already 10, with a formed personality." We talked for almost 2 hours, about Sam, about literature, about our own fathers, and the lessons, good and bad, they had left us. I discovered that Richard also came from a humble family, that he had been the first to go to college on a scholarship, and that he understood the value of effort and sacrifice better than I had thought. "You know," he said as we paid the bill, "I think Sam is very lucky." "Why?" "Because he has 2 very different but complementary male role models. From you, he can learn tenacity, determination, the value of hard work. From me, perhaps a different sensitivity, an approach to the arts, to emotional expression. He doesn't have to choose between us. He can take the best of both." His words made me see our situation from a completely new perspective. We weren't rivals in a competition for Sam's love. We were collaborators in the formation of an exceptional young man. "Thank you, Richard," I said as we parted. "For this conversation, for being good to my son, for not being the villain it would have been convenient for you to be." He laughed openly at my honesty. "Life is rarely simple enough to have clearly defined heroes and villains, don't you think? We are all complex, contradictory, capable of the best and the worst." "You sound like a book," I joked, unconsciously quoting Sam. "Occupational hazard," he admitted, "but that doesn't make it any less true." The following weeks brought a new dynamic to our peculiar extended family. Richard and I established a cordial, almost friendly relationship. We exchanged texts about Sam's progress and coordinated activities so they wouldn't overlap. We even started meeting occasionally, the 3 of us, to discuss the boy's educational future. Eleanor, initially bewildered by this rapprochement, soon began to relax and participate in this new configuration. Sam's drop-offs and pickups, which used to be tense and brief, turned into moments to catch up, to share concerns and joys related to our son. One Sunday afternoon, after spending the weekend with me, I drove Sam back to Eleanor's house. Richard greeted us at the door, holding a yellow envelope. "The contest letter arrived," he announced excitedly. Sam paled. He had sent his story to the National Youth Literature Contest a month ago, and since then, he'd been anxious for the results. "I don't want to open it," he said, backing away. "I'm sure I didn't win anything." "Open it," I encouraged him. "Whatever the result, we'll be proud." With trembling hands, Sam took the envelope and slowly tore it open. He pulled out the letter and read it in silence. His face, initially tense, gradually lit up. "3rd place," he finally exclaimed. "I got 3rd place nationally." Eleanor let out a cry of joy. Richard applauded enthusiastically. I felt my chest about to burst with pride. "Congratulations, champion," I exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "I knew you could do it." When we separated, Sam looked at Richard, who was smiling broadly. "You were right," he told him. "You said I had a chance." "I always believed in your talent," Richard replied. And then it happened. Eleanor, in a moment of euphoria, hugged Richard and exclaimed, "Thanks for always supporting him. He's more of a man than you," she said, turning toward me, her expression immediately transforming into horror as she realized what she had said. A deafening silence fell upon us. Time seemed to stop. I saw Eleanor's face go from jubilation to regret in a fraction of a second. I saw Richard turn pale, uncomfortable. And I saw, above all, Sam's eyes, wide with disbelief and pain at what he had just heard. "Jim, I didn't mean to," Eleanor began. I raised a hand to stop her. "It's fine," I said with a calm I didn't feel. "Congratulations again, Sam. I'm very proud of you." And before he could answer, I turned and walked toward my car, fighting to maintain my composure. I was opening the door when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned, expecting to see Eleanor with some prepared apology. But it was Sam, his face contorted with anguish. "Dad, don't leave like this." "Mom didn't mean that. She was excited. She didn't think." "I know, son. I'm not upset." I lied. "I just need to go now. We'll talk tomorrow." "No, you don't," he insisted with a surprising intensity. "You don't know what I really think, what I really feel." And then, to my absolute astonishment, he turned toward where Eleanor and Richard were still standing in the doorway, and he shouted, "Mom, that was horrible. You can't compare Dad and Richard like they're racehorses. They're both important to me, but Dad will always be my father." Then, before the astonished eyes of everyone, especially mine, he ran to Richard and hugged him briefly. "I love you. Thank you for everything you've taught me." And immediately, he returned to my side and hugged me tightly. "But you're my dad, and no one can be more of a man than the man who gave me life and who has fought so hard for me, even if sometimes in ways I didn't understand." I felt something break inside me, not from pain this time, but from relief, from gratitude, from a love so intense it physically hurt. I hugged my son tightly, unable to speak, letting the tears I had held back for years flow freely down my cheeks. Eleanor approached, her eyes also full of tears. "Jim, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I said that. I don't really mean it." "It was stupid," added Richard, who had also approached. "Eleanor is mortified, and rightly so. I'm embarrassed to have been used as a weapon in such an unfair comparison." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my son still against my chest. This moment, this breaking point, could take us down two very different paths. I could feed the resentment, let Eleanor's comment poison the fragile peace we had built. Or I could choose understanding, forgiveness, and move forward for Sam's sake. And surprisingly, for my own sake too. "We all say things we don't mean when we're emotional," I finally said, looking Eleanor in the eyes. "Or when we're hurt or scared or insecure. The important thing is what we do afterward. How do we repair the damage?" Eleanor looked at me with gratitude and surprise mixed together. She probably expected recriminations, anger, a regression to the old toxic dynamics that had characterized the end of our marriage. "I propose we celebrate Sam's achievement for what we are, an unconventional family that's trying hard to do the right thing," I suggested, surprising myself with my resilience. "How about we all go out to dinner?" "I know a place nearby that makes extraordinary steaks," Richard offered, catching my intention. Sam, still clinging to my side, looked at me inquiringly. "Will you stay, Dad? We'll all go together?" I looked at my son, then at Eleanor, and finally at Richard. These were the most important people in Sam's life, and by extension, in mine too. We weren't a traditional family, but we were his family, and maybe, after all, that was enough. "Yes," I finally replied. "We'll all go together." As we walked toward the cars with Sam running ahead, I felt a strange peace. Eleanor's comment had hurt profoundly, but my son's reaction, his passionate defense, his ability to love Richard without diminishing his love for me, had given me something far more valuable than the forced respect of being his biological father. It had given me his genuine respect, earned through my recent efforts to be a better father, a better man. And that, I realized as I started the car to follow Eleanor and Richard to the restaurant, was worth more than any business deal, any material possession, any wounded pride. Because in the end, we are what we leave in the hearts of those we love, and for the first time in a long time, I felt I was leaving something good in my son's heart. The dinner passed in a strangely cordial atmosphere, considering what had just happened. Sam, euphoric over his literary award, monopolized the conversation, telling us about his future plans. He wanted to submit his story to other competitions, perhaps expand it into a short novel. He dreamed of being published someday. Eleanor remained quiet, giving me looks of apology that I pretended not to notice. Richard, always diplomatic, kept the conversation flowing, asking Sam insightful questions about his creative process. "And what do you think, Jim?" Richard asked me at one point. Have you thought about what it would mean for Sam to pursue writing professionally? I felt 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me. The question was loaded with meaning. The old Jim would have responded with some practical comment about the difficulty of earning a living as a writer, about the need to have a real job as backup. But that Jim was in the process of transformation. I believe, I said, measuring my words, that talent must be nurtured. If Sam has the gift of words, it would be a crime not to cultivate it. Money, material security, that can be achieved in many ways, but passion. I looked directly at my son. Passion is a rare and precious gift. It must be honored. I saw Sam's face light up. Eleanor looked at me with a mixture of surprise and something deeper, perhaps nostalgia for the man I could have been during our marriage. Richard nodded in approval. Very wise, Jim, the professor said. The security we can give him is important, but more important is teaching him to follow his own star. Although, I added with a smile, nothing prevents combining passions. I know several writers who are also successful entrepreneurs. Exactly, Sam exclaimed. In fact, I was thinking I could study business and literature. They aren't mutually exclusive paths, right? Not at all, I agreed, feeling a warmth spread in my chest. My son was finding his own path, one that integrated aspects of both men in his life. I couldn't have been prouder. As dinner ended and we said our goodbyes in the parking lot, Eleanor asked to speak to me alone for a moment. Sam and Richard walked ahead toward the cars, giving us space. Jim, I need you to know how much I regret what I said, she began, her voice trembling. It was cruel and unfair, especially after how much you've changed these last few months. Why did you say it, Eleanor? I asked, not with anger, but with genuine curiosity. Do you truly feel I'm less of a man than Richard? She sighed deeply, avoiding my gaze. No, I don't feel that way. I said something horrible in a moment of emotion, something designed to hurt. Maybe part of me still resents the years I felt I was raising Sam alone, even though we lived under the same roof. I understand, I said, and I truly did. There are wounds that take time to heal, Eleanor. I failed you as a husband for a long time. I wasn't present when you needed me, when Sam needed me. I was so busy building an empire that I forgot to build a home. We both made mistakes, she finally replied, looking me in the eyes. I also let resentment grow instead of demanding more from you, of fighting for our marriage. I gave up on you long before I met Richard. We stood in silence for a moment, digesting these long-delayed truths. You know what's most ironic? I asked finally. We had to get divorced to have this honest conversation. Eleanor smiled sadly. Life rarely follows the path we plan, does it? Never, I agreed, but perhaps the path we took, with all its detours and stumbles, is exactly the one we needed. I surprised myself philosophizing. Another effect of my recent friendship with Richard, I supposed. The man was influencing me more than I had imagined. Thank you, Eleanor said simply, for forgiving me, for continuing to be a good father to Sam despite everything, for trying to get along with Richard. He is a good man, I admitted, and he makes my son happy. What more could I ask for? We said goodbye with a brief hug, the first in years that didn't feel forced or awkward. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how, in just a few months, my entire life had taken an unexpected turn. I'd gone from being the absent father, the resentful ex-husband, the man defined only by his material success, to being... what exactly? A man seeking redemption, a father trying to rebuild a damaged relationship, a human being finally recognizing that there was more to life than contracts and sales. Whatever the answer, I knew there was no going back. The road ahead might be uncertain, but it was the only one worth traveling. The following weeks brought new adjustments to our family dynamic. Sam started spending more time with me during the week, sometimes staying overnight at the apartment when he had school projects that required visiting downtown libraries or museums, which were closer to my home than Eleanor's. One afternoon, while reviewing his math homework at the dining table, my son asked me an unexpected question. Dad, what does it feel like to have so much money? I looked up, surprised. Where did that question come from? He shrugged. Curiosity. Everyone at school knows you're rich. Some kids say I should feel really special for having a millionaire dad, but I've never thought much about it. It's just normal for me, I guess. His question made me reflect. What did it really feel like? Was money the source of happiness I had always believed it would be? The truth, Sam, is complicated, I replied honestly. When I grew up with nothing, I dreamed of financial security. Being able to sleep peacefully knowing there would be food on the table the next day, that I could afford a doctor if I got sick. When I started making money, that peace was indescribable. I paused, sorting out my thoughts. But after that, something strange happens. The goal moves. You no longer want just security. You want luxury. Then you want more luxury. Then you want everyone to know you have luxury. It's like a thirst that is never completely quenched. That sounds sad, my son observed with the clarity only young people have. It is, in a way, I admitted, because while I was chasing more and more, I forgot to enjoy what I already had. I forgot that money is only valuable for what it allows: time with loved ones, meaningful experiences, helping others. If you sacrifice those things to get more money, what's it really for? Sam looked at me thoughtfully. Richard says something similar. He says he chose to be a professor instead of a lawyer, like his father wanted, because he preferred to have time to write and less pressure, even if he earned less. Richard is a wise man, I said, and I meant it sincerely. He found his balance before I did. I'm only learning now at 62 what he seems to have understood since he was young. It's never too late, right? Sam said, repeating a phrase I myself had recently told him. Never, I confirmed, ruffling his hair like when he was small. Now, back to those equations. That night, after Sam fell asleep, I sat on my penthouse balcony with a scotch, gazing at the city lights. The conversation with my son had stirred something deep within me. Had I truly found my own balance, or was I just beginning to look for it? My phone rang, interrupting my reflections. It was Mark Evans, my general manager, calling at an unusually late hour. Mr. Miller, excuse the hour, but we have a situation with the European vehicle shipment. Customs is holding everything due to a documentation issue. We need your signature for some urgent matters first thing tomorrow. Of course, Mark. I'll be there at 8. Thank you, Mr. Miller. With all respect, it's a relief that you're taking a more active role in the company again. The last few months, with your frequent absences, have been challenging. His words made me pause. It was true. I'd been less present in the business lately, prioritizing my relationship with Sam. Was I neglecting my responsibility as the leader of a company that employed hundreds of people? Have a lot of problems come up? I asked, feeling a pang of guilt. Nothing we can't handle, Mr. Miller, he replied diplomatically, but your experience and vision always make a difference in complex situations. After hanging up, I kept thinking about balance. True balance. It wasn't about choosing between being a good father or a good businessman. It was about being fully present in each role, giving the best of myself in every space I occupied. The next day, after resolving the customs crisis, I convened a meeting with my management team. It was time to make structural changes that would allow me to be effective in the company without sacrificing my personal life. We are going to implement a new organizational structure, I announced. Mark will assume more executive responsibilities as Chief Operating Officer. We will create a strategic decision committee where all of you will have a voice and a vote. I will remain as president, focused on the long-term vision and major decisions, but trusting you for the daily management. I saw surprised faces around the table. In 30 years, I had never truly delegated power. Are you sure, Mr. Miller? Asked Lisa Chen, my CFO, a brilliant woman who had been with the company for 15 years. It's a very significant change. Completely sure, Lisa. All of you have proven your capacity and loyalty over the years. It's time for you to have the authority that corresponds to your responsibility. Besides, I added with a smile, I'm not immortal. This company must be able to function without me eventually. Are you thinking of retiring? Mark asked, visibly alarmed. Not in the short term, I reassured him, but I want to start building a legacy that transcends my daily presence. And frankly, at my age, I also want to enjoy my family and my personal interests more. The meeting extended for hours as we outlined the new structure, everyone's responsibilities, and the decision-making processes. When it was over, I felt as if a weight I didn't know I was carrying had been lifted. I wasn't abandoning my company. I was evolving as a leader, trusting the team I had built. That afternoon, picking up Sam from school, I felt lighter, more present. My son noticed it immediately. "You look different, Dad. Did something good happen?" "I made some important decisions at work," I replied as we drove. "Changes that will allow me to have more time for the things that really matter." "Like what?" "Like being with you without being mentally in the office, like maybe resuming some abandoned hobbies. Did you know that when I was young, I liked photography? Your grandfather gave me an old camera when I turned 15, and I spent years documenting life on the farm, in the small town." "I had no idea. Do you still have those photos?" "They must be in a box at my ranch house outside Austin. I haven't seen them in decades." "We should look for them this weekend," he exclaimed enthusiastically. "We could go to the hill country, make a getaway. Maybe we could invite Mom and Richard too," he added suddenly, insecure. I was surprised by his suggestion, a trip with my ex-wife and her new partner. A few months ago, the idea would have seemed absurd, even offensive. Now, strangely, it didn't sound so crazy. "You know what? That could be interesting," I replied. "I'll talk to your mother tonight." The call with Eleanor that night was surreal. After her initial surprise at my proposal, she agreed to consult Richard. To my astonishment, the answer was positive. "Richard loves the hill country," Eleanor told me when she called me back. "He says there's a great local museum there that might interest you, given what Sam told him about your old hobby." And so, that Friday afternoon, I found myself driving toward the hill country with Sam by my side, followed by Eleanor and Richard's car. My house there, a restored old ranch on the outskirts of the town, had remained mostly empty since the divorce. A caretaker couple who lived in an annex house maintained it, but I rarely visited, preferring my city penthouse for weekends. Upon arrival, Maria, the caretaker, greeted us with evident surprise at seeing the unusual group. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Eleanor, young Sam, welcome," she said, looking curiously at Richard. "We've prepared the rooms as you requested on the phone and—" "Thank you, Maria. This is Mr. Richard Guzman, a family guest," I explained naturally, surprising myself with the ease with which I had said family, implicitly including everyone present. Dinner that night, prepared by Pedro, Maria's husband, and an excellent cook, was surprisingly pleasant. In the relaxed setting of the ranch house, away from the city and its pressures, a fluid and engaging conversation emerged. Richard turned out to be an excellent storyteller, keeping everyone entertained with anecdotes from his literary travels across the country. And Eleanor, more relaxed than I had seen her in years, laughed openly, occasionally adding comments or corrections to my own stories about Sam's early years. "Do you remember when he tried to fix your computer with a screwdriver?" Eleanor reminisced, laughing. "You were so furious your face turned purple." "I had important files on there," I defended myself, smiling. "But yes, I did overreact a bit. After all, he was only 4 and wanted to be like his dad, always fixing things." "You were always good with your hands," Eleanor commented, and for an instant I saw a flash of something old, familiar, in her eyes. A shared memory of better times, perhaps. "I still am," I replied, raising my glass in a small toast, "although these days I'm more dedicated to repairing relationships than objects." "A more difficult job, no doubt," Richard observed. "Objects don't have emotions or memory or expectations," I added. "Objects don't get disappointed in you." A thoughtful silence followed my comment. Sam looked between us, attentive to the dynamic. "People shouldn't get so easily disappointed either," Eleanor finally said. "We all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them, right?" "Absolutely," Richard agreed. As Samuel Beckett said, "Try again, fail better." "I like that," I commented sincerely. "Fail better." Sounds like something my father could have said, though with simpler words. "Your father was a wise man," Eleanor said, surprising me. During our marriage, she had rarely spoken positively of my father, whom she considered too traditional and limited. "He built a strong man from simple but solid principles." Her words moved me more than I cared to show. For the first time in a long time, I felt Eleanor saw something valuable in my origins, in my essence, not just in my material achievements. The next morning, after breakfast, Sam insisted on searching for the old photographs. We went up to the attic, a spacious, organized area where I kept memories, documents, and items I no longer used but didn't want to discard. "Where could they be?" my son asked, looking at the numerous labeled boxes. "Probably in one of those marked Youth Personal," I replied, pointing to a corner. "It's been so long since I've looked through this that I barely remember what's here." Eleanor and Richard had joined the expedition, also curious for this glimpse into my past. We started opening boxes, discovering forgotten treasures. My high school books with notes in the margins, a football jersey from when I played on an amateur team, letters from my mother when I first moved to the city. "Look at this," Sam exclaimed, pulling a worn leather album from a box. "It's your photos, Dad." I took the album with almost reverent hands. "Yes, those are my first photographic attempts. I didn't expect to find them so easily." We sat on the attic floor, forming a circle around the album. Opening it, I felt a wave of nostalgia. There they were, black and white images of rural life in Oklahoma in the 70s. Farmers working the land, children playing on dusty roads, old women knitting on the porches of adobe houses, town festivals with dancers and musicians. "These are beautiful, Jim," Richard said with genuine admiration. "There's an honesty, a humanity in these images that many professional photographers don't capture." "You had talent," Eleanor agreed, studying a photo of an elderly woman holding a baby. "Why did you give it up?" The question made me reflect. Why indeed? I guess life got in the way. Work, responsibilities. It seemed like a youthful hobby, not something for a grown man with a family to support. "But it could have been both," Sam observed. "You could have been a businessman and a photographer." "I know that now," I admitted. "But back then, I believed I had to choose, that being a successful man meant leaving certain things, certain parts of myself, behind." Richard nodded understandingly. "It's a common trap. We confuse maturity with giving up, as if growing up necessarily means abandoning parts of our identity." Sam slowly turned the pages of the album, absorbing each image. "These photos tell stories, Dad, like the stories I write, but with images instead of words." "Maybe we should collaborate someday," I suggested, surprising myself. "Your words, my photos? If I pick up the practice again, of course." "That would be incredible," Sam exclaimed, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "We should do it, a book together." The rest of the day passed in a haze of discoveries and reconnections. We found my old Pentax camera, surprisingly still functional. Eleanor unearthed letters we had written during our courtship, provoking laughter and blushes as we read particularly romantic passages aloud. Richard discovered a collection of poetry books I had forgotten I owned, enthusiastically pointing out authors we both admired. That night, sitting on the terrace under a starry sky, with Sam already asleep after an exhausting day, the three adults shared a moment of uncommon honesty. "I never imagined we could be like this," Eleanor confessed, looking out at the moonlit yard. "The three of us talking civilly, even enjoying each other's company." "Life takes strange turns," I commented, sipping my scotch. "Sometimes what seems like an irreparable loss turns out to be the beginning of something new, something different, but equally valuable." "There is a beauty in that," Richard added, "in the human capacity to rebuild, to find new configurations of happiness after the pain." "I'm glad we're here," Eleanor said suddenly, her voice loaded with emotion. "I'm glad Sam can see that the people who love him can overcome their differences, their wounds, for his sake, and for our own too." "To Sam," I toasted, raising my glass. "To Sam," they replied in unison. And in that moment, under the starry sky of the Texas Hill Country, I felt a chapter close and a new one begin. A chapter of reconciliation, not just with my ex-wife and her partner, but with myself, with the man I had been and the man I could still become. Months passed since that night in the Hill Country. Time, as always, brought changes, some expected, others surprising. Today we are all gathered again, but the occasion is special. Sam's book launch at a major New York City literary event. At 13, my son has managed to publish his first collection of short stories, illustrated with photographs I took specifically to accompany his words. Stories of Iron and Paper, we titled it, a nod to our respective worlds, mine of cars and metal, his of literature and creativity. I watch with pride as Sam answers questions from the audience with an astonishing maturity. Eleanor is sitting to my right, Richard to my left. Throughout the year, our strange family configuration has stopped feeling forced or uncomfortable. We found a balance that works for everyone, especially for Sam, who flourishes under the care of 3 adults who love him deeply. "How did the idea of collaborating with your father come about?" a journalist asks. "It all started with a box of old photos," Sam replies with a smile. "I discovered that my dad had this hidden talent, this sensitivity that no one knew about. I realized that we were both storytellers, just with different tools." His words move me. A year ago, I would never have imagined my son describing me as someone with sensitivity. The old Jim would have considered that word almost an insult. Now, I receive it as the most valuable compliment. The presentation ends with enthusiastic applause. As we sign copies, I watch Richard chat animatedly with a major editor. Eleanor organizes the line of readers with her characteristic efficiency. We are an improbable but effective team. After the event, we celebrate at a nearby restaurant. Sam, ecstatic over his success, barely touches his food. "I want to propose a toast," Richard says, raising his glass, "to Sam, whose talent makes all of us proud, and to this unconventional family we have built." "To family," I agree, also raising my glass. Eleanor looks at me with a warm smile. Who would have thought, right, that those horrible words I said that day would somehow, in a twisted way, end up uniting us more than separating us? "Sometimes crises are opportunities in disguise," I reply. "You forced me to look in the mirror, to question what kind of man, what kind of father I truly wanted to be. And you turned out to be more of a man than anyone expected," Richard says sincerely, "including me." Sam watches us with a mixture of amusement and affection. "You know, many of my friends with divorced parents live in a constant war. They feel like they have to choose sides. That loving one is betraying the other. I'm lucky. I have 3 adults who put their egos aside for my well-being. His words are the best gift I could receive. Of all my possessions, of all my achievements, nothing compares to my son's respect and love." That night, back in my hotel room, I reflect on the long road traveled. Little more than a year ago, I faced the greatest humiliation of my life when Eleanor said those cruel words, and my son ran to hug Richard. In that moment, I felt I had lost everything that mattered. Now I understand that I didn't lose anything truly valuable that day. I lost a mistaken idea of respect based on fear and obligation. I lost the illusion that money and success would make me untouchable. I lost the false belief that being a man meant never showing vulnerability, never admitting mistakes, never changing course. And in return, I gained something infinitely more precious, an authentic relationship with my son based on mutual knowledge and acceptance, an unexpected friendship with the man I once considered my rival, a peace with my ex-wife that I never thought possible, and above all, a reconciliation with myself, with the young man who once took photographs in rural Oklahoma, with the man I always wanted to be but had forgotten along the way. Tomorrow, we will return to Dallas. I will return to my dealerships, now managed primarily by a competent team, while I focus on strategic projects and, of course, my rediscovered passion for photography. Sam will return to school, now with the added confidence of being a published author. Eleanor and Richard will continue with their lives, intertwined with ours in ways none of us would have predicted. I don't know what the future will bring. I only know that at 63, I finally understand that being a man, being truly a man, has nothing to do with dominating others or accumulating wealth. It has to do with the capacity to grow, to acknowledge mistakes, and to put love before pride. And for the first time in my life, I feel proud not only of what I have built, but of who I have become.